at 5:26 on a cold Monday morning. Nurse Rebecca Sloan was halfway through her first cup of coffee when her phone rang. The number wasn't saved. She almost ignored it. Then she noticed the area code belonged to the Naval District. "Hello," a man's voice answered. "Is this Rebecca Sloan?" "Yes, this is Rear Admiral Grant Holloway." Rebecca straightened in her chair. "Yes, Admiral?" There was a pause. Then his voice became quieter. "I need help with my K9. Rebecca glanced at the clock. "What happened?" "I don't know." That answer worried her more than almost anything else. "What is he doing?" "He isn't doing anything." She frowned. "Can you explain?" "He stopped eating. Since when?" "Almost 4 days." Rebecca reached for a notebook. "Drinking?" "Barely." "Any vomiting?" "No." "Diarrhea?" "No." "Limping?" "No." "Has he been injured?" "Not that I know of." She wrote everything down, then asked, "Is he barking?" "No." "Responding to commands?" "No." "Playing?" "No." "What does he do?" Grant's answer came almost immediately. "He stands against the wall." Rebecca paused. "What do you mean?" "He presses his side against it and just stays there." "How long?" "Sometimes 20 minutes. Sometimes an hour. He moves only when I physically guide him." Rebecca leaned back. "Has he shown aggression?" "No." "Fear?" The Admiral hesitated. "I don't know." Rebecca noticed the hesitation. "What do you mean?" "I've had him for 6 years." She waited. "I know what he looks like when he's tired. I know what he looks like when he's sick. I know what he looks like when he's angry. But this," his voice dropped. "I've never seen this before." Rebecca closed her notebook. "What's his name?" "Diesel." "Age?" 8. "Military history?" "Former military working dog." Rebecca nodded. "Then don't try to force him to eat." Grant was silent. "And don't drag him away from the wall unless there's an immediate safety concern." Another pause. "Can you come?" Rebecca looked at the dark window beside her desk. "Yes." "Before we find out why Diesel has stopped eating, stopped responding, and now spends hours leaning against a wall, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to see how far these stories travel. And subscribe for more emotional military K9 stories." Rebecca left the hospital less than an hour later. She had worked with service animals during rehabilitation cases before, but this sounded different. A dog refusing food for 4 days required medical evaluation. A dog refusing everything else, too, required something more. She kept thinking about Grant's words. "He just wants the wall." Why? A dog that had spent years being trained to move toward sound, commands in human direction, was now choosing stillness. And not just stillness context, pressure. A solid surface against his body. Rebecca wondered whether that was telling her something. The Admiral's home was inside a secure naval residential district. A quiet property, clean landscaping, simple architecture, no dramatic gates or displays of rank. Grant met her at the front door. He looked exhausted. "Thank you for coming." Rebecca nodded. "Show me." They walked inside. The house was unusually quiet. No television, no music, no household staff. Grant pointed toward the living room. Diesel was there. Rebecca stopped. The German Shepherd was standing with his right side pressed firmly against the wall. His head was lowered. His eyes were open, but distant. He didn't bark. He didn't turn when Grant entered. He didn't turn when Rebecca entered. Rebecca looked at the dog for nearly 20 seconds, then asked, "How long has he been in this position?" Grant checked his watch. "About 40 minutes." Rebecca nodded. "Has he moved at all?" "He moved to the kitchen earlier, then came back here." She approached only halfway. Diesel didn't react. That concerned her. Not because he looked dangerous, because he looked absent. Rebecca crouched slightly. "Hi, Diesel." The dog's ears moved a fraction, then went still. Grant whispered, "This isn't him." Rebecca looked at him. "What happened 4 days ago?" "Nothing." She waited. Grant frowned. "I don't know. Think carefully." He looked toward the dog. The only major change was, he stopped. "What?" "My old K9 partner died." Rebecca looked at him. 4 days ago?" "Yes." "Was the dog here?" Grant nodded. "His name was Bruno." "What happened?" "He was retired. 16 years old. He had been declining for months." Grant swallowed. "He passed away at the veterinary hospital." Rebecca looked at Diesel. "Did Diesel know him?" Grant's expression changed. "They were together for years." "How close?" "They slept in the same kennel when they were deployed. They trained together. They retired to this house together." Rebecca slowly stood. "So Diesel lost his companion 4 days ago." Grant nodded. "But I thought dogs don't—" He didn't finish. Rebecca looked at him. "They notice changes, especially dogs that have strong social bonds." Grant stared at Diesel. "I thought he was sick. He might still be." She pointed gently toward the dog. "But the timing matters." Rebecca asked Grant to bring Diesel's veterinary records. While he searched for them, she didn't approach the dog. She watched. Diesel's nose moved occasionally. His breathing was slow. His body wasn't trembling. No obvious pain, no rapid panting, no repeated attempts to hide. He was simply standing with his side against the wall. Rebecca looked around the room. Then something caught her attention. A large bed stood near the fireplace. 2 bowls, 2 blankets, 2 sets of toys. One was untouched. The other had been pushed toward the wall. Rebecca asked, "Where did Bruno sleep?" Grant pointed. "Right there." Diesel slept beside him. Usually. She looked toward the empty space, then back at Diesel. The dog had positioned himself against the wall, exactly where the edge of Bruno's old bed had been. Rebecca walked closer to the bedding. She noticed something else. A faint indentation remained in the blanket. She didn't touch it. Instead, she asked, "Have you washed this?" Grant shook his head. "No." "Why?" "I couldn't." Rebecca understood. The blanket still smelled like Bruno. And Diesel had been pressing himself against the wall beside it. Not because he wanted the wall. Because the wall was the last solid boundary beside the place where his companion used to sleep. Rebecca looked at Grant. "I don't think he's trying to disappear." "What is he doing?" "I think he's staying as close to Bruno's old place as he can." Grant's face tightened. "He hasn't eaten." Rebecca nodded. "That's serious. He won't move." "Then we don't make him move just because we're uncomfortable watching it." Grant stared at her. "What should we do?" Rebecca looked toward Diesel. "First, we rule out a medical problem. And then," she paused, "then we help him understand that the house is still safe." Grant looked at Diesel again. "And how do we do that?" Rebecca lowered herself to the floor several feet away. She sat, she did nothing else. Diesel's ears moved. Grant watched. "You're just sitting there?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because right now, I don't think he needs another person asking him to respond." She looked at the dog. "He needs someone willing to stay nearby without demanding anything." Diesel slowly turned his head. For the first time since Rebecca entered the house, he looked directly at her, not at Grant, at her. Rebecca didn't move. Diesel kept staring. Then, very slowly, he lifted one paw away from the wall. Grant held his breath. The dog didn't walk forward. He simply stood there, looking at Rebecca. And Rebecca realized the wall wasn't the whole story. Diesel wasn't refusing the world. He might still be looking for a reason to trust it again. For the next several minutes, Nurse Rebecca Sloan remained exactly where she was. She didn't call Diesel. She didn't reach for him. She didn't offer food. She simply sat on the floor several feet away. The retired military K-9 kept watching her. His body was still partly against the wall, but the pressure had changed. He wasn't leaning as heavily. His head was raised. His eyes were focused. That was the first change Rebecca had seen. Rear Admiral Grant Holloway stood behind her. "Is that good?" Rebecca nodded. "It means he's still engaging with his environment. Even though he hasn't moved. Movement isn't the only thing that matters." She watched Diesel carefully. "Look at his eyes." Grant did? "He's watching you." "Yes. And that's unusual?" "Very." Rebecca smiled faintly. "Then don't interrupt." Grant sat on the opposite side of the room. For several minutes, neither adult spoke. Diesel remained near the wall. Then his nose moved. He sniffed the air. Rebecca noticed. "What are you seeing?" Grant whispered. "Nothing. He's checking scent." "Of what?" "Everything." She pointed toward the hallway. "Your house smells different." Grant looked confused. "It's the same house." "Not to him." Rebecca stood slowly. "Bruno's scent is still strongest in that area." She looked toward the blanket beside the fireplace. "But the rest of the house has changed." Grant frowned. "I've cleaned." "Exactly." He stared at her. "What should I have done?" "I don't know yet." Rebecca looked toward Diesel. "We need to understand what he is trying to preserve." A veterinarian arrived 40 minutes later. Dr. Aaron Feldman had been treating Diesel for several years. He examined the dog carefully. Heart rate normal, temperature normal. No obvious orthopedic pain, no abdominal sensitivity, no fever, no signs of an acute injury. But Diesel's appetite remained poor. Dr. Feldman looked at Grant. "We should run blood work." Grant nodded. "Do it." While the tests were being processed, Rebecca remained nearby. Diesel stayed close to the wall. But now he occasionally looked at her. That mattered, Dr. Feldman noticed. "You've only been here an hour." Rebecca smiled. "I haven't done much. That's why it may be working." He looked at the dog. Dogs in distress are often surrounded by people trying to fix something. Rebecca nodded. "Exactly." Grant looked between them. "So what do we do?" Dr. Feldman answered first. "Keep checking the medical side." Rebecca added, "and reduce pressure." The blood work came back within normal ranges. There was mild dehydration. Nothing else that explained the dramatic behavioral change. Dr. Feldman looked relieved. Grant didn't. "Then what is wrong with him?" Rebecca looked toward the living room. "Grief may be part of it." "Part?" She nodded. "There's another possibility." "What?" She pointed toward the fireplace. "When did you move Bruno's things?" Grant looked at her. "I put his bed against the wall." "When?" "The day after he died." "Why?" "I couldn't look at it." Rebecca nodded. "That's understandable." She paused. "But Diesel may have experienced that change differently." Grant frowned. "How?" "He lost Bruno. Then the scent changed. The bed moved. The routine changed. And the house became quieter." Grant slowly sat down, so he lost his partner, then woke up in a different version of the same home. "Yes." Rebecca looked at Diesel. "That can be overwhelming. If this story is touching you, consider subscribing. Sometimes a quiet change in a dog's behavior is the only way they can show us that something inside them has changed too. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to see how far these stories travel. Rebecca asked Grant to do something difficult. "Put Bruno's bed back." Grant stared at her. "You're sure?" "Not permanently, just for tonight." "Why?" "Because Diesel has been repeatedly returning to that location." Grant looked toward the empty space. "I don't know if I can." Rebecca's voice softened. "You don't have to do it because you're ready." You can do it because Diesel isn't. Grant looked at her. After a long pause, he nodded. He moved the bed back, then placed Bruno's old blanket beside it. Diesel immediately lifted his head. He stood slowly. He walked toward the bed, sniffed it, then stood beside it. Grant's eyes filled. He hasn't gone there since the funeral. Rebecca stayed quiet. Diesel lowered his head. He sniffed the blanket again, then looked toward Grant. It was the first time the dog had voluntarily approached him all morning. Grant crouched. "Hey, buddy." Diesel walked over. He pressed his head against Grant's shoulder. Grant closed his eyes. Rebecca looked away. Some moments didn't need commentary. That evening, Diesel finally drank water. Then he ate a few bites of food, not much, but something. Grant stared at the empty bowl. He ate. Rebecca smiled. "Good, that's it." "For tonight, yes." Grant looked almost frustrated. "I want him back." Rebecca nodded. "I know, but he won't become normal overnight." Rebecca looked at him. "Don't use that word." "Which one?" "Normal." She gestured toward Diesel. "He's responding to a major loss. He isn't broken. He is adjusting." Grant was quiet, then nodded. "Okay." The next morning, Rebecca returned. Diesel wasn't against the wall. He was lying beside Bruno's old bed. Grant looked amazed. He moved overnight. Rebecca smiled. "That's important." "Why?" "Because he chose a different location." Diesel lifted his head. Rebecca sat nearby. This time, he stood, walked toward her, stopped, then sat. Grant watched. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing." Diesel looked at Rebecca. She extended one hand. He sniffed it, then lowered his head beneath it. Rebecca gently touched the fur around his neck. He didn't pull away. Grant's expression softened. "He hasn't let anyone touch him there." "Not since Bruno died?" "No." Rebecca nodded. "Then that's significant." Over the next several days, the routine changed gradually. Bruno's bed remained for a while. Then it was moved slowly toward a quieter corner. Diesel's feeding schedule became consistent. Walks were shorter. Visitors were limited. Grant stopped calling Diesel repeatedly whenever the dog withdrew. Instead, he sat nearby, waited, allowed Diesel to choose. And something unexpected happened. The dog started choosing. He began sleeping away from the wall. He started following Grant into the kitchen. He brought his blue training toy once, then twice. One morning, he stood at the door waiting for his walk. Grant stared. "You want to go outside?" Diesel's tail moved. Rebecca smiled. "Ask him." Grant opened the door. Diesel stepped outside. For the first time in days, he looked curious. He sniffed the grass, lifted his head toward the morning air, then walked forward. Grant's eyes filled. "He's coming back." Rebecca shook her head gently. "He's moving forward." Grant looked at her. "What's the difference? He doesn't have to become the dog he was before." She watched Diesel. "He just has to become comfortable being the dog he is now." But there was still one thing bothering Rebecca. Every evening, Diesel returned to the wall for several minutes. Not for an hour. Not all night. Just a few minutes. He would press his shoulder against it, close his eyes, then walk away. Grant asked, "Should I stop him?" "No." "Why?" "Because maybe he doesn't need us to take that memory away." Rebecca smiled. "Maybe he needs to know he can visit it and still leave." Grant looked at Diesel. That idea seemed to change the way he saw the dog. The wall wasn't the enemy. It was part of the dog's mourning. And mourning didn't always need to be corrected. Sometimes, it needed to be given a safe place. One evening, Rebecca was preparing to leave when Diesel stood near the doorway. He looked at her, then at the empty hallway, then back at her. Rebecca paused. "What?" Grant laughed softly. "He doesn't want you to go." Rebecca smiled. You think? Diesel took one step toward her, then stopped. Grant looked amused. He's never done that with visitors. Rebecca crouched. Good night, Diesel. The dog touched his nose to her hand, then returned to Grant. Rebecca stood before leaving. She looked at the Admiral. Tomorrow, move the bed. Grant frowned. Where? Not away from the wall, toward the center of the room. Why? Rebecca smiled. Because I think he's ready to make a choice. Grant looked toward Diesel, the old bed, the wall, the open space. For the first time in days, there were 3 possible places for him to rest. And Rebecca had a feeling Diesel was finally ready to decide where he wanted to be. The following morning, Nurse Rebecca Sloan returned to Rear Admiral Grant Holloway's home. When she walked into the living room, she immediately noticed the difference. Diesel was no longer standing against the wall. He was lying beside his old bed. His head was resting on his paws. His eyes were open, watching, but not hiding. Grant stood near the kitchen doorway. He moved again. Rebecca smiled. I can see that. Last night, he walked around the house. Did he eat? Almost the entire bowl. Rebecca nodded. Good. He even brought me his training toy. That's excellent. Grant looked toward Diesel. I thought I had lost him. Rebecca shook her head. You were watching him like something was wrong with him. There was. No. She looked at Diesel. Something was wrong around him. Grant became quiet. That distinction mattered. Rebecca sat on the floor. Diesel lifted his head, then stood. He walked toward her. Not quickly, not cautiously. Just normally, he stopped beside her. Rebecca offered her hand. He sniffed it, then lowered his head beneath her palm. Grant smiled. I've never seen him do that. Rebecca gently stroked his fur. He's learning that the world is still predictable. What changed? We did. Grant looked at her. We stopped asking him to be the dog he was before Bruno died. For weeks, Grant had been searching for a solution. A trainer, a specialist, medication had been considered, behavioral therapy, diet changes, more exercise, less exercise. But Rebecca had done something different. She had observed. She had asked one question: what changed? And the answer had not been complicated. Diesel had lost his closest companion. Then his home changed, his routine changed, his scent environment changed. His people became anxious. Everyone around him wanted him to return to normal. So Diesel had retreated to the one place that remained predictable. The wall. It wasn't a strange obsession. It was the only constant he could find. Grant moved Bruno's old bed toward the center of the room. Diesel watched. Rebecca watched too. The bed moved slowly, half a meter, then another. Diesel stood. He walked around it. Sniffed the blanket, looked at the wall, then looked toward Grant. Grant stopped moving. What now? Rebecca smiled. Let him decide. Diesel stood there for several seconds. Then, he walked toward the middle of the room. He turned once, looked around, and lay down, not against the wall, not beside Bruno's bed. In the center, Grant stared. Rebecca smiled. He chose. Grant swallowed. That's the first time he's done that. Exactly. If Diesel's story has stayed with you, consider subscribing. Sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means learning that you can remember it and still move forward. And tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to see how far these stories travel. Over the next 2 weeks, the changes continued. Diesel began eating normally. He started greeting Grant at the door again. He responded to familiar commands. He brought his blue training toy. He accepted short walks. And one afternoon, something happened that Grant hadn't seen since Bruno died. Diesel ran. Not far, just across the yard. But he ran. Grant laughed. That's him. Rebecca watched from the porch. That's a part of him. Grant turned. What do you mean? He isn't going back. He's going forward. Grant smiled. That sounds like something you've said before. Because you keep trying to get him back. He looked at Diesel. I miss Bruno too. Rebecca nodded. I know. The Admiral's face softened. Maybe I've been making it harder for him. Possibly. He sighed. I thought if I kept everything normal, he wouldn't notice Bruno was gone. Rebecca looked at him. Dogs notice. Grant laughed sadly. Apparently. And people do too. He nodded. The conversation became quiet because Rebecca wasn't only talking about Diesel. Grant had lost Bruno too. He had been grieving while trying to remain the officer in charge of everything. He had spent weeks managing his dog's pain because it was easier than acknowledging his own. Rebecca saw it. Diesel probably had too. One evening, Grant sat on the floor beside his dog's bed. He held an old photograph of Bruno. Diesel walked over. He sniffed the photograph, then sat beside him. Grant smiled. You miss him too. Diesel rested his head against Grant's shoulder. Rebecca watched from across the room. Neither of them needed to say anything. For the first time, Grant allowed himself to grieve without treating grief as a problem that needed to be solved. Diesel didn't need Grant to hide the loss. He needed Grant to acknowledge it. And Grant finally did. A few weeks later, the Admiral called Rebecca again. How's he doing? Good. Actually good? Rebecca smiled. Yes. Grant laughed. He sleeps in the middle of the room now. Good. He still visits the wall. Rebecca nodded. How long? A few minutes. Then walks away. Exactly. That sounds healthy. Grant was quiet. You know what I realized? What? I don't need him to stop remembering Bruno. Rebecca smiled. No. I just need him to know he's safe enough to keep living. Rebecca nodded. That's the whole thing. Months passed. Diesel returned to his normal routine. Not the exact routine he had before. A new one. He became more social. He accepted familiar visitors. He slept in different rooms. He played more often. He followed Grant around the house. But once every few days, he would still walk toward the wall, stand there, close his eyes, then leave. Grant never stopped him. Rebecca never asked him to. The wall had become a memory, not a prison. One afternoon, Rebecca visited again. Grant wasn't home. Diesel was with a family assistant. When Rebecca entered, Diesel walked toward her. He stopped, looked at her. Then walked to the wall. He pressed his side against it for several seconds. Rebecca didn't interrupt. After a while, he moved away, walked back, and lay down beside her. She smiled. I know. Diesel's tail moved. You miss him. The dog closed his eyes. She sat beside him. No one is asking you to forget. Diesel leaned closer. Rebecca gently stroked his fur. And for a few minutes, the house was completely quiet. When Grant returned, he found them sitting together. He stopped. You two have your own arrangement now. Rebecca laughed. Apparently. Grant looked at Diesel. The dog was relaxed, completely different from the animal he'd seen weeks earlier. Grant walked over and sat beside them. For a moment, the three of them simply stayed there. Then Grant said, I want to thank you. Rebecca smiled. For what? You didn't fix him. No, you taught me how to stop trying to. Rebecca nodded. That mattered more. Grant looked at Diesel. He saved me too. Rebecca looked at him. What do you mean? He made me understand I wasn't the only one grieving. She smiled. Sometimes dogs make us admit things we wouldn't say ourselves. Grant laughed. That's exactly what happened. Before Rebecca left, Grant walked her to the door. One more thing. She turned. What's that? I used to think being a good handler meant knowing how to control a dog. Rebecca smiled. And now? Knowing when not to. She nodded. That's a good lesson. He looked back toward Diesel. The German Shepherd was lying in the middle of the room, not against the wall, not hiding, just resting. Grant smiled. Thank you. Rebecca nodded. You're welcome. Months later, Diesel would still occasionally visit the wall. And nobody worried, because they understood now. Recovery didn't mean erasing Bruno. It didn't mean pretending the loss hadn't happened. It meant Diesel could remember his companion and still eat. Remember him and still play. Remember him and still sleep. Remember him and still choose the center of the room. That was the real change. Rebecca had not made the military K9 normal again. She had helped the Admiral understand what the dog was saying. And Grant had learned to listen. Sometimes a dog doesn't need another command. Sometimes he doesn't need another treatment. Sometimes he needs someone to notice what changed around him. To stop asking, how do I make him go back to normal? And start asking, what does he need to feel safe again? Diesel had been standing against that wall because it held the last familiar piece of a life that had disappeared. Now he could leave it. Not because he had forgotten Bruno. Because he finally believed there was still something worth moving toward. And every evening, when Grant came home, Diesel would meet him at the door. The Admiral would kneel. The dog would lean against him. And, for a few seconds, neither would move because sometimes healing doesn't look like a dramatic transformation. Sometimes it looks like a dog who once spent an hour facing a wall, finally turning around and choosing to come home.